I didn't hear my name at first, just laughter. The sharp, smug kind. The kind that makes your spine stiffen before your ears catch up. It was late afternoon, golden light slanting across the backyard as smoke curled from the grill. Our family's annual summer barbecue, the one Marcus always turned into his own stage. He stood with his friends near the patio bar, one hand around a craft beer, the other gesturing big. He was always gesturing big, talking big, laughing big. That afternoon was no exception. I was walking back from the kitchen, a plate of grilled corn and coleslaw in my hands, when I heard him say it. "If my startup crashes," Marcus said, laughing, "I'll just go live with Clarissa. She's always been my backup plan. They say if you've ever been betrayed by family, hitting like brings peace, subscribing brings clarity, and commenting brings karma to those who wronged you. Try it, and tell me where you're watching from." Anyways, there was a beat, and then more laughter. "Yeah," one of his friends added. "She's probably still doing that little freelance thing, right? Copywriting? Canva logos?" They cracked up like it was the cleverest thing in the world. I stood behind them, just far enough to be out of their line of sight, but close enough to catch every word. My plate felt suddenly heavy, my mouth dry. I blinked at the grass, willing myself not to cry. Not here, not again. No one turned around. No one saw me, because no one ever really did. I walked back toward the folding table where the condiments were scattered and set my plate down quietly. I wasn't hungry anymore. "Clarissa," my mother called from a lawn chair, waving an empty lemonade glass. "Could you grab more ice?" I nodded and went back inside, because that's what I did. That's what I always did. The good daughter, the helpful sister, the quiet one, the one who kept the peace, kept her mouth shut, kept showing up even when it hurt. But that night, something shifted. I left the party early, claimed I had a deadline. No one stopped me. No one asked why I barely ate, why I barely spoke. As I pulled out of the driveway, headlights cutting through dusk, Marcus's voice echoed in my head. "She's always been my backup plan." He said it like a joke. But jokes, I've learned, are where people hide their truths. I drove in silence, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. My studio apartment waited for me, quiet, organized, filled with the hum of my second monitor still on. And the silence inside me? It cracked. But not the way it used to, not with tears or shame. This time, it cracked open something harder, something sharper, something like resolve. I poured myself a glass of water when I got home and stood at the kitchen counter, staring at my reflection in the microwave door, and I said out loud, "I'm not your backup plan." The words surprised me, so I said them again. "I'm not your backup plan," because the truth? I was never his plan at all, or anyone's. Not in that house. Not growing up. I was the extra chair at dinner, the emergency contact, the ride to the airport, the +1 when someone needed balance in a family photo. Marcus was the star, the chosen one, the CEO even before he had a product. And me? I was the safety net, the just in case, the fallback. But they never once asked what I'd been building while they weren't looking. That night, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop. I reread a proposal I'd been putting off. I tightened my portfolio site, sent a follow-up to a promising lead, and replied to 2 overseas clients before midnight. Then I closed my eyes and made a promise to myself. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. If I was going to be invisible to them, I'd build something so undeniable that their blindness would become their problem, not mine, because I wasn't going to stay in the background forever. Not for him, not for anyone. Growing up with Marcus was like living beside a lighthouse. He beamed, he blazed, everyone turned to look. And I was the fog. They never said it out loud, not really. But I felt it in the pauses, in the way praise came quickly for him, and slowly, if at all, for me. I was the child who didn't need help, who didn't cry when she fell, who figured out her own homework when no one had time to explain it. But it didn't feel like strength back then. It felt like being forgettable. Marcus got straight A's again, my mom would announce over dinner, holding up his report card like it was a trophy. That's my boy, Dad would say, clapping him on the back. Then they'd turn to me. Clarissa, you did okay, right? I'd nod. Even if I had done well, even if I'd worked twice as hard, the ceiling for Marcus was the sky. For me, it was the low beam they ducked under. I remember once, 7th grade, I won an art contest at school. First place. My drawing hung in the main hallway for a whole month. I came home with the certificate, buzzing. Nice, Dad said, glancing at it. Maybe one day you'll design a logo for your brother's company? He laughed. I didn't. I kept the certificate in a drawer. I stopped showing them things after that. When I was 16, I spent the summer teaching myself how to code. I made a little budgeting app for fun. Showed Marcus. He scrolled through it, then shrugged. Cute, Marcus said, but you should focus on like normal careers. No one's going to pay you to play with colors and buttons. I was always coloring outside the lines, apparently. Even when I started my business years later, built my own client list, and launched an actual agency, I still got the same look, the same tone. This is a cute little project, Dad said when I told him. Just don't forget to look for something more stable. Not everyone can be a star, Mom added. Be realistic, honey. Realistic. That was their favorite word when it came to me. Not brilliant, not bold, just practical, manageable, background. Even in family photos, I was always the one standing slightly off-center, holding someone else's purse, holding the dog, holding the phone to take the picture. I remember being 12 and getting straight B's one semester. No one said anything. The next week, Marcus won a regional science fair. They threw a party. I baked the cupcakes for it myself. No one asked me to. But I wanted to help. I always wanted to help. Always useful. Never celebrated. There's a particular kind of loneliness in being reliable. It teaches you how to disappear in plain sight. How to say, it's okay, when it's not. How to keep showing up without being seen. But what they never saw, what no one saw, was the fire that built in that quiet. It started small. A flicker. I'd hear Marcus talking about his dreams of becoming the next tech giant, and I'd think, I have dreams too. But no one asked me about them. It grew stronger every time my father introduced me as our creative one with a dismissive wave. It burned hotter when I overheard my mother saying to a friend, Marcus will do big things. Clarissa? Well, she's sweet. And it turned molten when I realized, at age 25, that my parents didn't know the name of my company, that they'd never seen my website, never asked. I became a quiet force, working late, learning fast, saying nothing, because I realized something. Stars shine because they burn, but so do wildfires. And wildfires, they don't ask for permission to spread. So while they kept watching Marcus, applauding his every stumble like it was a leap, I was outgrowing the frame they built for me. They called me the extra, the backup, the sweet one, and I let them, but only so they wouldn't see me coming. Most people assumed I was just freelancing, designing apps, maybe consulting for startups, nothing serious. At least, that's what my family told themselves. What they never asked was, who were these startups? Who was wiring me six-figure payments? Who was listing me as technical advisor in their SEC filings? My name never made the headlines, but it was on the dotted line. After that humiliating barbecue, I poured myself into work with a new intensity. Not out of spite, out of certainty. Certainty that I never wanted to need validation from Marcus or anyone else again. 3 years earlier, I'd launched a small consulting firm from my one-bedroom apartment. No partners, no funding, just me, my laptop, and a handful of LinkedIn contacts. The first year, brutal. I slept 4 hours a night, ate microwave oatmeal, took meetings from the floor of my living room because I didn't have a proper desk. But I delivered, every single time. One client referred another, then another, And suddenly, I was consulting for a VC-backed AI company, then a wellness tech platform, then a payment gateway startup expanding into Latin America. Behind the curtain of some very loud, very confident founders was me. My work wasn't loud, but it was essential. When a Fortune 500 company needed a post-merger tech integration strategy, they called me. When a cloud firm's product team spun out to launch their own SaaS platform, I designed the back end. When a celebrity wanted to launch a wellness app, I reviewed the code architecture and user flow. But at Thanksgiving, my father still said, "So, are you still doing that little website thing?" My mother still smiled like I was a child with a lemonade stand. I didn't bother correcting them. One afternoon, I got a call from a managing partner at Equinox Capital, a global tech holding company that had been quietly buying up boutique consulting agencies across the US. He said, "Clarissa, I've been following your work for years. We want to bring you in-house." I replied, "I'm not looking to be someone else's employee." He said, "We're not looking for an employee, we're looking for a leader." We negotiated for 6 weeks. I retained creative autonomy. They acquired my company, and I stepped into a new role, Senior VP of Strategic Development, overseeing tech incubators across 6 markets. I still worked behind the scenes, but now I controlled far more than just client pipelines. I reviewed applications for funding rounds, built innovation portfolios, sat on advisory boards. I wasn't just consulting anymore, I was shaping who got through the door. One day, as I was reviewing applications for our upcoming accelerator cohort, I opened a familiar name. Founding team, Clarissa Wren, CEO. I stared at it for a full minute. There was no mention of me on the page, of course. Marcus was pitching a platform to streamline supplier relationships for small retailers. The idea was half-baked but shiny. Buzzwords everywhere: blockchain logistics, AI-assisted procurement, gamified vendor scoring. He clearly hadn't changed, still trying to sound bigger than he was. But here's what he didn't know. The accelerator he was applying to? It was run by Equinox. The final applications landed on my desk. The evaluation process? I helped design it. And his company? It was now indirectly under my purview. I read every word of his proposal, every slide of his deck, not out of revenge, out of curiosity, because my brother had once laughed and said I was his backup plan. Now I was holding the future of his startup in my hands, and he had no idea. I didn't reject his application. That would have been too easy, too emotional. Instead, I flagged it for review. Let the process play out. Weeks later, our investment team shortlisted Marcus's company for an in-person pitch at our regional headquarters. I didn't tell anyone about the family connection. I didn't need to. He'd be pitching on merit, and I'd be there, not as his sister, but as the one who held the room together. Before the meeting, I got a Slack ping from our program director. "Hey, VP Wren, you free to sit in on the pitch reviews?" I typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." I didn't know what I wanted more. For him to recognize me and realize the irony, or to keep talking like I was nobody important. Either way, I'd earned this moment, not by stepping on him, but by quietly building something real. And now, his future might depend on the person he once dismissed as still doing that little freelance thing. The ballroom shimmered with soft amber lighting as Clarissa stepped into the venue, her heels quiet against the marble floor. She moved like water, measured, composed, deliberate. Around her, executives buzzed with networking energy. Lanyards, branded notebooks, caffeinated ambition. Clarissa smoothed her blazer. No nerves, just focus. A staff member approached her with a clipboard. "Ms. Wren?" Clarissa replied, "Yes. You'll be seated at table A as one of the executive sponsors. Right up front. Your name's already on the panel folder." Clarissa nodded. "Thank you." She walked past the line of eager founders, all pitching for a coveted spot in the tech accelerator. It was invitation only. 10 finalists. 4 would receive funding. 1 would get full-scale integration into the parent company's ecosystem, a company Clarissa now helped lead. She glanced at the program. Slot 7, Marcus Vance, founder of Replico AI. There it was, his logo, his tagline, his name. Clarissa took her seat. She didn't look toward the preparation area, didn't flinch as each startup pitched. One by one, they climbed on stage, trying to dazzle. Most of them were young, hopeful, slightly panicked. She listened, took notes, scored quietly. Then, the MC's voice cut through the air. Our next pitch comes from a founder with serious momentum behind him. Please welcome Marcus Vance of Replico AI. Applause, spotlights. Marcus walked onto the stage, confident in a designer blazer, jaw squared with swagger. His hair was styled like he'd spent an hour on it, but he still wore that same cocky grin Clarissa remembered from every childhood competition. Marcus took the mic. Hi everyone, I'm Marcus Vance. Replico AI started in my apartment 2 years ago, fueled by caffeine, curiosity, and a pretty brilliant idea. I'm here because we're ready to scale. Clarissa folded her hands. Marcus launched into his deck. Slides clicked behind him. Graphs, testimonials, mock-ups. He walked the room like he owned it. He even winked at someone near the back. Then came the name-drop parade. We've had conversations with investors at Northwell, Brightspark, even tentative interest from a couple execs in your own family. He laughed. The parent company behind this very accelerator. Clarissa didn't blink. At the judges' table, one of the junior VPs leaned over to her and whispered, "He's polished. Not sure how deep the product goes, though." Clarissa whispered back, "We'll find out." The MC returned to the mic after Marcus's presentation. "Thank you, Mr. Vance. Please remain for questions. First up, from Ms. Clarissa Wren, executive sponsor." Clarissa stood. Marcus's eyes flicked to her. He smiled. It was that generic, polite smile you give a stranger. She could see it. He didn't recognize her. "Hi," Clarissa said. "I have a few questions about your back-end architecture. You mentioned scalable infrastructure. Can you elaborate?" Marcus responded smoothly. "Absolutely. We're built on a hybrid AWS GCP model with containerized microservices. It's robust, and our CTO has implemented redundancy at every layer." Clarissa followed up. "Your CTO, what's their experience?" Marcus hesitated for half a second, just enough. "He's a brilliant guy, young but agile. You know how startups are. We wear a lot of hats." Clarissa tilted her head. "And the security protocol around your synthetic data training models? Who wrote those specs?" Marcus's grin thinned. "It's a team effort. I oversee direction, but we have a dev group handling the deeper layers." She nodded. "Thank you." The other judges asked their questions. Clarissa said nothing more. As the session ended, Marcus passed by the table, flashing a confident grin. "Hope we get to work together." Clarissa looked up and replied, "I'm sure you do." He walked away, completely unaware. The VP next to her murmured, "He doesn't know who you are, does he?" Clarissa answered, "Not yet." Backstage, as the judges convened in a private lounge, Clarissa sipped water and reviewed her notes. Replico AI had potential, but the leadership? Unsteady. Polished surface, unstable foundation. Still, the irony sang like a quiet orchestra in her chest. He hadn't even flinched at her last name, Wren, the same name he'd mocked, the sister he'd dismissed, the backup plan. She could have corrected him, could have said, "It's me, Clarissa, you know, the one you laughed at behind the grill while holding a solo cup like it was a trophy." But she didn't. She would wait. Let it land naturally. Let the title do the talking. "Next steps?" a board member asked. "We'll call a second meeting," another said. "Narrow down to 3. Clarissa stood. "I'll arrange the final interviews. Bring them in one by one." The VP raised an eyebrow. "You want to run the last round personally?" Clarissa replied, "Yes, I think it's time they understood who they're pitching to." Later that evening, Clarissa opened her email. Her assistant had sent the scheduled list of final interviews. At the bottom, 3:30 p.m., Marcus Vance, Replico AI, Evaluator, VP Clarissa Wren. She clicked confirm. Then she sat back in her chair, calm as moonlight. No fireworks, no gloating, just a quiet promise. You once called me your backup plan. Now, I'm your gatekeeper. I was already seated at the head of the long glass conference table when Marcus walked in. He was wearing a blazer that looked just a little too forced, something trendy he'd probably borrowed or bought just for the pitch. His slides were in a branded leather folder. His hair was pushed back, styled in that casual but deliberate way, like he wanted to look like he'd just strolled off a yacht. He stepped through the door, bright-eyed, holding his laptop under one arm, and then he froze. "Clarissa?" Marcus said, blinking like he couldn't quite trust his eyes. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I simply nodded toward the table and said, "Please begin." His mouth opened, closed, and then he chuckled awkwardly. I'm the executive chair for this round," I said, keeping my voice calm, even, unreadable. "Go ahead. We're on a schedule." He looked around the room as if trying to find some explanation, some exit, but there was none. 5 other decision-makers sat along the table, each with their notepads and tablets out, waiting. None of them knew we were siblings, and I had no intention of changing that. Marcus cleared his throat and began his pitch. Right. So, our company, Snaptable, is transforming the food photography experience. Our app allows users to take AI-enhanced food photos with dynamic filters tailored for engagement metrics. He was rattling. I could see it. His usual confidence faltered. His rehearsed charm cracked. He was saying words, but there was no conviction behind them. I watched him stumble through the market size. He overinflated the numbers, skipped over the user retention slide, avoided specifics on revenue. After 10 minutes, I lifted my hand gently. "Can we pause here?" I asked. He looked at me, sweaty. Sure." I tapped my pen against the table. "What's your monthly churn rate?" Marcus blinked. "Our what?" "Customer drop-off," I said. "How many users uninstall within 30 days?" "I mean, we're still in beta," he replied. "So we're not really looking at churn right now." I nodded once. "So you have no retention data?" He flinched. "We're working on it." I moved to the next question. "You mentioned AI-enhanced filters. What's the underlying model architecture?" Marcus swallowed hard. We're using an open-source model with some in-house tweaks." "Which model?" I asked. He glanced down at his notes. "I'd have to get back to you." The room was quiet. One of the investors scribbled something. Another closed his laptop, unimpressed. I leaned back in my chair. Not smug, not cruel, just composed. "Thank you," I said. "You may continue." Marcus went through the rest of his slides like a man walking barefoot across broken glass. He made it to the end, finally, and let out a sigh. "That's our vision," he said weakly. "We'd be thrilled to have your support." I nodded once. "Thank you." The panel offered a few more surface-level questions, mostly to be polite. Then the session ended. People stood. Hands were shaken. Marcus lingered. When the others had left the room, he approached me. "Clarissa," he said again, softer this time. "Why didn't you tell me?" I met his eyes. "Because you already decided what I was worth." He stood there, staring at me like he didn't know whether to apologize or defend himself. "I didn't mean it like that," Marcus said. "What I said at the barbecue." "You meant it exactly like that," I interrupted. "You always have." He shifted his weight. I didn't know." "That's the point," I said. "You never asked." He was silent. For once, Marcus had no quip, no comeback, no clever remark to brush it all off. I gathered my notes and tucked them into my portfolio. "You'll get feedback through the formal channel," I said. "Good luck." Then I walked out. Not with a smirk, not with triumph, just purpose. Because I didn't need him to understand right away. I just needed him to finally see me as I was. Undeniable. The first message came on a Thursday morning. "Hey Clarissa," Marcus wrote. "Got a minute to chat? Thought maybe we could grab coffee and catch up." Clarissa stared at the screen. A week ago, Marcus had walked into the pitch room and discovered she wasn't just another face in the company, she was the one leading the table. Now, the tone had shifted. Gone was the smirk, the swagger, the assumption that she'd always be there to cushion his fall. She didn't reply. 2 hours later, her voicemail pinged. "Clarice, it's me, Marcus. I just wanted to say you were really impressive the other day. I didn't realize everything you've been doing. I think we should talk. I could use your perspective on some of the feedback we got, from a big picture angle." Clarissa sat at her desk, legs crossed, calm. She opened the internal CRM and routed his contact to the advisor team he'd been assigned. Then she replied to his text with a single line. "Please route any follow-up questions through your assigned advisor. Thanks." No bitterness, no heat, just structure, professional, impenetrable. Later that afternoon, the board convened to review the results of the accelerator pitches. Clarissa sat 2 seats away from the CFO, flanked by directors and analysts. One of the board members, a sharp-eyed woman named Maya, glanced at the file and said, "Let's talk about Novum Tech." That was Marcus's startup. His brilliant idea about predictive consumer analytics using recycled behavioral data sets, which, Clarissa had already noted, lacked real safeguards for ethical data use. "Promising tech," Maya said, "but the founder lacks a clear operational plan. Too focused on vision, not enough on systems." Clarissa didn't flinch. She let the others speak. Another director chimed in. "He has potential, but he's not ready for direct funding. Too many leadership red flags." They agreed on a mentorship track, a slower path, with oversight, accountability, and a required 6-month development phase. Clarissa signed off on the decision. Marcus wouldn't know it yet, but the team overseeing his strategic roadmap would now be reporting directly to her. The next morning, she received a calendar invite. Weekly check-in, Novum Tech Oversight Team. Under participants, her name was at the top. She smiled. By the following week, Marcus had figured it out. He showed up at the office unannounced, asking the front desk if Clarissa was available. "She's in meetings today," the receptionist replied. "Okay, can I just leave a note?" The receptionist looked confused. "Sorry, she doesn't accept personal notes here. Would you like to contact her assistant?" Marcus blinked. "Oh, yeah, sure." The receptionist handed him a business card with the name of Clarissa's EA, Tasha, on it. Marcus walked away slowly, hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched, not the same man who had laughed at her over BBQ and beers. 2 days later, Clarissa joined a strategy call with Marcus's newly assigned oversight team. She was calm, collected, clear. "Where are we with his milestone report?" Clarissa asked. One of the managers responded, "He's submitted his Q1 goals, but we're still refining scope. He's enthusiastic, just needs more guidance." Clarissa nodded. "Good. Let's keep that energy focused. Talent is only as valuable as its ability to collaborate." No mention of their shared last name, no winks, no softness. This was business. That evening, Clarissa's phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus. "I know things got weird, but I never meant to make you feel like you didn't matter. You've done amazing. I'm proud of you. Just wanted you to know that." She read it twice. She didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, but because she'd finally learned that his validation wasn't fuel, it was noise. Years ago, she might have wept at that text, might have clutched it to her chest like an overdue trophy. Now? It was just a few late sentences from a man who had always spoken too soon and too loud. Later that week, she reviewed his updated business plan. It was better, cleaner. Someone on the mentorship team had clearly helped shape it. She added her notes quietly in the margin. Precise, encouraging where appropriate, firm where needed. Then she signed it. Clarissa Wren, VP Strategic Development Oversight Lead, Emerging Ventures Division. She hit send. No flourish, no message to Marcus, just action. The next time their paths crossed, it was at a quarterly showcase for the incubator's newest cohorts. Startups from around the country came to present progress, pitch refinements, and future vision. Marcus stood near the refreshments table, scanning the room. He didn't notice her arrive. She wore navy, a tailored blazer, no name tag. She didn't need one. When the host took the stage and announced, "Please welcome our executive sponsor for the evening, Ms. Clarissa Wren," all heads turned, including his. Clarissa took the mic, smiled. "Tonight, you'll hear from entrepreneurs shaping tomorrow's tech, and some of them," she glanced briefly at Marcus, "have grown more in 6 months than many do in 6 years. Let's give them our full attention." She stepped off stage. The applause echoed, and when she passed Marcus, she gave him a small, polite nod. Nothing more. That was all he'd earned. Back in her car that night, Clarissa sat in the quiet. She wasn't angry. She wasn't vengeful. She was full of what she had built, of who she had become, of the quiet fire that had carried her from backup plan to backbone of the operation. The real reversal wasn't that Marcus needed her now. It was that she no longer needed anything from him. Not the coffee, not the apology, not the past. The day Marcus started onboarding, he walked into the conference room like he owned it. He adjusted the collar of his blazer, scanned the neatly printed agenda on the table, and smirked at the team seated around him. "Looks like I'm finally in," he said to no one in particular. An intern looked up from her laptop and gave a polite nod. Marcus didn't recognize any of the names listed above him on the org chart, not yet, but he skimmed it quickly as the orientation packet was handed around. Then he paused. Right at the top of the strategic oversight ladder under the VP designation was a name he hadn't seen in years: Clarissa Wren. He blinked. "Wait, is that—" "Excuse me," he said, stopping the HR coordinator mid-sentence. "This VP Wren, who is that?" The coordinator replied, "Clarissa Wren, Vice President of Strategic Innovation. She oversees all teams under the Holdings East incubator, including yours." Marcus went completely still. The realization hit him like cold water down the spine. He was 2 rungs below her. He looked around the table. "When will we be meeting her?" One of the managers replied, "Oh, probably sooner than you think. She's hands-on." Later that afternoon, during the first strategic planning session, the room was packed. Marcus sat near the front, trying to look unbothered, surrounded by analysts, PMs, and accelerator liaisons. The session started with a logistics update, then an overview of the quarterly objectives, and then, mid-slide presentation, the lead manager looked up. "I'll confirm final approvals with VP Wren by end of day," she said. Marcus heard it like a drumbeat. Then came a soft knock on the glass door. Everyone turned. Clarissa walked in. Perfectly tailored black suit, hair pinned back, tablet in hand, calm, composed, unshakable. The room stood. She nodded, acknowledging the team with effortless authority. "Let's keep this moving," Clarissa said. Marcus didn't move, didn't breathe. She didn't look at him directly, not yet. She took a seat at the far end of the table, reviewing slides on her screen, occasionally interjecting with questions sharp enough to silence the room. Every suggestion was thoughtful, every correction surgical. When someone asked about the onboarding schedule, Clarissa replied without glancing up, "That team will report directly to strategic innovation. Let's ensure expectations are aligned." The entire room nodded. Marcus sat frozen, watching his sister operate in a room he used to mock her for dreaming of. And now, she ran it. When the meeting ended, the team filed out slowly, buzzing. Clarissa stayed behind, packing her things neatly. Marcus hovered in the doorway, unsure. He finally stepped forward. "Clarissa," Marcus said quietly. She looked up. "Yes? You're her?" Clarissa closed her tablet. "I am." He swallowed. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I didn't know I needed to," Clarissa replied. Her voice was even, not cruel, not smug, just matter of fact. Marcus tried to laugh it off, but the room still echoed with the image of her at the head of the table. There was no erasing it. Back at home, he scrolled through his old texts with her. Barely a thread. Nothing beyond birthdays, holidays, if that. He remembered all the times he'd dismissed her, teased her, called her reliable, like it was a consolation prize. But here she was, not just in the room, running it. 2 days later, during a 1-1 with his direct manager, Marcus asked, "So how much authority does VP Wren have on our track?" The manager blinked. "Total. She sets the strategy. We execute it." Marcus tried to keep his voice light. "And, does she usually interact with individual projects?" "Only the ones with potential," the manager replied. "Or problems." Marcus laughed too quickly. "Right, just wondering." The manager leaned in slightly. "You didn't know she was your sister?" "I mean," Marcus said, fumbling, "we haven't been that close lately." "She's sharp," the manager said. "Everyone listens when she speaks. One of the best we've got." Marcus nodded slowly, swallowing the weight of it. That night, he stared at his ceiling, thinking about the barbecue, about the joke, about calling her his backup plan. He never imagined she was building the ladder he'd one day have to climb. And now, she was at the top. There's a quiet kind of satisfaction that doesn't need an audience. Clarissa stood alone in her corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows casting light across the glass table where her team's quarterly goals were neatly outlined. She sipped her coffee slowly, watching as the city came alive below her. She had everything she once thought was beyond her reach: influence, autonomy, and most importantly, peace. Not approval, not applause, peace. She remembered the years they forgot she was even in the room, the way her voice was always the second choice, if it was even heard at all, the way her ideas had to be spoken by someone else, someone louder, before they were taken seriously. She remembered being 12, quietly fixing the family printer while Marcus got praised for bringing in the groceries. She remembered being 26, launching her business from the couch with secondhand equipment and 1,000 self-doubts, while Marcus was bragging at dinner about seed funding he'd landed from a college buddy. She remembered birthdays they skipped, job titles they never asked about, weekends where they'd all gather, and she'd be the one on the end of the bench, clearing plates while they talked about Marcus's next big thing. And then came that day. The day he laughed. "If my startup crashes, I'll just go live with Clarissa. She's always been my backup plan." She didn't know then how much those words would unlock. But now, she was glad he said them, because they marked the last time she let anyone define her by their limitations. Now she sat on 3 investment boards. She was a mentor in 2 international accelerators, and every quarter she carved out time to coach young women entering tech, especially the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who were never picked first. "I used to think I had to earn my place," Clarissa told a room full of scholarship recipients one afternoon. "Now I know the room was built wrong, so I started building better ones." They clapped, some cried, all took notes. She didn't need to say who she was thinking of. They knew. Back at the office, her assistant buzzed in. "You've got a visitor. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says you'll know him." Clarissa raised an eyebrow. "Send him to the cafe on 12. I'll be down in 15. She didn't rush. When she arrived, Marcus was already there, slouched in a chair, coffee half drunk, eyes flicking up nervously as she approached. "Clarissa," Marcus said, standing. She gave a soft nod. "Marcus." He gestured awkwardly. "Thanks for seeing me." She sat down across from him. "What can I do for you?" He smiled, or tried to. I just wanted to say I was wrong about you." Clarissa looked at him, long and even. "I know," Clarissa said. "That's why I stopped waiting for your permission." Marcus blinked. "I didn't mean it like that. I just—" He trailed off. Clarissa waited. Let the silence do its work. Finally, Marcus sighed. "I always thought you were playing it small. I didn't realize—" "That I was building?" Clarissa asked. "That I was leading from the back of the room until I had the keys?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I thought you were the safety net," Marcus admitted. "Turns out, you built the system." Clarissa didn't smile. She just gathered her things, stood up, and said, "And now? You answer to it." She left the coffee untouched. Back at her office, she framed a photo of her first tax return, the one from the year she made less than minimum wage trying to launch the company no one believed in. She placed it beside a newer photo, her name etched in the brass plaque outside the boardroom she now chaired, the same boardroom Marcus once pitched in. The caption below that second photo was from an article written by a Forbes contributor after one of her keynote speeches, Clarissa Wren, the founder who outgrew their narrative. The final lines of her speech still echoed in her head. "They thought I'd be their safety net, but I built the system, and now they answer to it, and to me." If you enjoyed the story, make sure to subscribe for good luck.